Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Velero Community Meeting / Open Discussion. Today is June 23rd. There we go. 2020. And per usual, we get some status updates and a bunch of discussion topics. So let's get started. I'm going to start share my screen here. And if you have any discussion topics, please add them to the meeting notes. There we go. All right. First up, we have Nolan.
Hey everybody. Not a whole lot of coding last week. More reviews and meetings, helping people figure out what to work on. So yeah, lots of reviews. I'm sorry if I did not get to your review. And there was also a lot of internal work on some VMware projects related to Velero. So not a whole lot to add other than that. So yeah, boring update for me this week.
All right, there we go. Anything you're working on this week that you would like to get some input
on? This week I'm really trying to get the reviews for the Carlisia's QBuilder PR closed out. Mm-hmm. I would love to get the progress PR. I think that's 2611. That design PR closed out. I'm pretty close. I think I need to double check the backwards compatibility section. I was reading it before the meeting. There's a call for the other maintainers to take a look at that. And then we have a discussion this week about the restore hooks PR that I put here. We're going to have a separate discussion because it's probably going to be longer than we can fit into this call, and still be able to fit other topics in. But yeah, mostly this week, I would really like to get these design things in. That's the main goal.
Sounds good.
Hey, Nolan, since we're going to be setting up the additional call to discuss the PR on the restore hooks, do you just want to give a light summary on this call of what we're doing there? I think we do have maybe one of the contributing members on the call, one or two today.
Yeah, could we save it for the discussion topic section?
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions, comments for Nolan? Okay. Moving over to Carlisia.
Hello. So I on community support this week. Yeah, hi. And really want to get that PR merged, especially because the other one I'm working on, I just want to rebase for master, get it cleaned up. So I got some comments from Alay Patel. Might have mispronounced your name. I'm sorry.
You got it right. Thanks.
All right. So I really appreciate that. And if you have time to add more, it'll be great too. Yeah. And anyone has questions about this? All right. Can go back to that view. So still going through PR reviews and adding tests to that new BSL controller. And I also have to add, I think I'm going to look into adding webhooks for that to validate, to do the validation on BSL creation and update, create and update. So the test and validation on create and update is what needs to be, what needs to be added to that PR. That's it for me.
Awesome. Any questions, comments for Carlisia? All right. And Ashish is out today. He worked on backing up volumes with Rustic by default. and hopefully he can be back next week and talk a little more about that. Or do you want to chime in, Nolan?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know this was something a lot of people asked for. This behavior will be in 1.5, and it's not changing how Velero works by default. It's if you have restic turned on and you give a server flag, then you can have restic back up volumes without having to annotate those volumes. So this will hopefully alleviate a lot of confusion around Rustic because we in the past have had the requirement to have people go in and annotate each volume that they wanted to have targeted by Rustic, which is admittedly annoying. So hopefully with 1.5, this will be a lot less irritating and a much smoother experience. So yeah, that was something Ashish got merged in this past week.
Awesome. All right, I think we're ready to move on to the discussion topics.
Yeah, so I'll just since Stephanie mentioned it and Alay asked for a brief summary. So restore hooks, the idea, the problem is Velero on backup has a way to hook into the process and call executables, whether those be scripts included in your containers or just executables that happen to be included. And do things like quiesce your databases or quiesce your app if it's got something that it needs to do. And so these things can store your application state and do something with that, such as put it into a volume that Velero would then snapshot. And then restore hooks, the proposal is to get something that Velero could use to basically do the inverse and get the application state ready for the application on restore so that it would have its state there and ready to go when it starts up. Mark Campbell has proposed this design. We've got a lot of feedback from folks here at VMware who were on the Pivotal team before. And the discussion right now, where it currently stands, is there's some discussion on whether or not we should take the design as is, which is largely based on our restic design, which kind of puts the containers in place, or the pods in place.
I just don't feel comfortable doing like anything super crazy on your birthday.
Could you mute, please?
Oh.
Thanks. So the proposal as is tries to run the containers and have them get adopted by, the pods tries to have them get adopted by whatever owns them. So whether that be deployment, daemon set, replica, stateful set. The problem that could come up is, depending on what application that is, they may be starting up with empty data, and these restore hooks would then run and try to insert data in the middle of the application's execution. So Ashish isn't on, but he was asking about, instead of the current design as proposed, what if we do this with init containers and maybe modify the containers and put init, I keep saying containers, modify the pods and put init containers on them that run the hooks, whatever those may be. Or some other form that makes sure we run and populate the data before we start the application. So I think that is a summary of the current state of the proposal. I know Mark mentioned late last week that in his project that uses Velero, they actually used init containers. I don't know if anyone else has anything that they would want to jump in and say something on.
Hi, Nolan. This is Vishnu. Um, I think if the need for restore hooks is for populating the data in the volumes, I think the PVCs have some, if I'm not wrong, there are some fields for PVCs to populate the data, like data source kind of things are available. I'm not sure whether that will help for this use case. If that is the only need for restore hooks. I hadn't been through the PRI, sorry for that. Just from the today's, whatever you mentioned, I thought that may help.
So the data source field, right now, I actually talked to Xin Yang about this, the SIG lead for SIG storage. I talked to her about this yesterday. That data source field is only used for CSI snapshots right now. There are plans to use that for a generic, what's being called a generic data populator, but that's not even in alpha yet upstream. So whenever that would be ready, that would be the ideal thing to use, but it's not going to be ready until at least Kubernetes 1.20. And even then it would be an alpha feature flag. So we would need something prior to that.
Yeah, that makes it.
I'm sorry. I have a quick question regarding that data populator field, if you guys don't mind. So as the summary that Nolan mentioned states, we really want a way for the applications to run some sort of executable during restore, right? Now, the end goal of that executable is to generate or populate data for the applications to run. But in some cases, can it be different? And in that case, can this data populator be not the right thing for us?
The Kubernetes data populator?
Yeah.
Potentially. The kind of the goal of the Kubernetes upstream data populator is that it would basically be in the Kubernetes PVC path, and that Kubernetes would not mark a PVC as ready to use until the data populator was done. So in that way, it lets the application know it can't even get the PVC or PV until the data is there. With the restore hooks or with anything out of band like Velero, we have to rely on something like init hooks or something like that to basically get a ready PVC, jump in, do something, and then start out the application. The data populators may not be the fit. They're still in design phase. So
Thanks.
No, and I want to add in one more kind of wrinkle that we've run into with the init containers recently in our implementation. And this very well may be like too application specific and not like something that Velero should be in context, but I just wanted to bring it up. One of the use cases that we're using backup hooks and restic and restore hooks for is for Postgrads. And so we have a backup hook in 2 volumes, an empty dir volume, and it runs PG dump over there, and then it has that, and then restic includes that in the backup and the restore hook. So we would create an init container inside the Postgres during restore to do the restore, but the problem is you can't run PG restore in an init container because the second container now, which is Postgres, is not running. So PG restore can't talk to a Postgres because there's actually no instance of Postgres running. So we've resolved this problem, in our example, we solved this problem by putting the restore hook in a different pod, like in a total different workload, right? An API. And so this API is not going to report healthy, but it allows Postgres to come up, and then it can do the PG restore. But it definitely is just another thing to think about when we're thinking about how restore hooks should work.
Yeah. And okay, that is a good thing to think about, because some databases, you can just like move the data directory.
Exactly.
Some you have to have a running service to write it into.
I mean, as it turns out, Postgres and MySQL and a lot of these have these entry point init directories, and so you can actually just dump the directory there, but Postgres will start up from it. So there's a potential workaround, but that's why, like, I'm not sure whether this is something that is very application specific or whether it's a Velero like consideration in how restore hook should be implemented. Yeah,
and I think Valero's goal is to provide building blocks that like we can get most of the way there, and like you said, like Postgres has a way around it. So an init container could put stuff into like a well-known location.
Exactly.
And one thing, and Ashish and I had talked about, and I think Andrew Reed had brought up, was, for example, if you have to talk to a database, let's say you don't have a well-known location you can put information in, do you have to make sure you're doing that only once? So yeah. Can you do that with multiple copies, and are we then getting into orchestration? That is a big unknown.
Yeah, the way that we have, like a pseudo restore hook thing implemented to solve our problem, we've always created this init container in our API pod here, and it has a simple script in it that looks for the Postgres dump file. And if it exists, it runs the PG restore and then deletes the file. So then on restart, it's idempotent as long as it did complete successfully, but it's like, it feels a little brittle and like, a little bit orchestration-y, and like not something that we'd like to be able to have this as a long-term solution.
Right. And for the one you wrote originally, was that for a specific application, or was it kind of generic? Or I didn't look at the code you linked. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so the application that we're delivering is a tool that allows other ISVs to include their application. But we're using Velero in two different ways. We use it to back up our own state, which does include a Postgres database and a Minio as S3, object store. But then an ISV who's packaging their code inside our application can also use it. And it turns out that they often have a Postgres database inside most applications. And so they're looking at our example as a way that they could implement it inside their own code too.
Got it. Okay. Are there other folks on here that have thoughts on this?
I just have one more on the point of PG restore, which got brought up. So which means that the data that is backed up also should have been done by the Postgres itself using PG backup. Otherwise, the restore, if I'm not wrong, PG restore may not work. I think it's becoming the app specific restore, and I suppose it has to be app specific backup as well. Otherwise, that may not work out for restore.
Right. They would have to be done in such a way that, like, you have to make sure your backup and your restore hooks are compatible.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, they're not going to magically fit.
Right.
So if you're using the PG, is it PG data directory? You have to make sure you do your backup such that it can be written there. I forget the commands. It's been a while since I've run Postgrads myself.
Yeah, which was an interesting, as we wanted to move the restore over to a separate, workload in order to like allow Postgres to spin up. It actually, because of the way that Velero works, we actually had to move the backup over to that other pod also. Otherwise, during the restore time, like the volume's attached to the wrong workload and we couldn't actually do the restore.
Right, because Velero doesn't, this was a question I was getting yesterday too. Velero doesn't allow you to remap the PV to another pod.
Right.
Like the closest we could get was in a init container. Well, we can't even attach init containers right now.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a blocking problem, but it's related in the fact that we had to, as we thought through our restore process, we had to kind of re-architect our backup process to be compatible with how we wanted to restore.
Yeah.
So I had some thoughts on restating the problem. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the problem that we are trying to solve with the restore hook after this discussion looks like more of a policy issue, that some applications want synchronous behavior, as in they want their restore hooks to run before the application start, whereas other applications might want asynchronous behavior, that is, they want the restore hook to run after the application starts. Is that a better way of phrasing the problem for restore hook, and is that what Velero will be interested in solving for?
I think that's accurate. My understanding is most applications want the data populated prior to actual application startup, but I don't have data to bear that out. Like you might want the database service running, but you don't actually want your application started until that data is populated.
I mean, from our perspective, when we wrote it, we looked at the backup hooks, and and Velero supports pre and post backup hooks. And, I think that's your comment is right. Like, I think for restore, if we don't have synchronous and asynchronous or pre and post restore hooks, you ultimately don't have a one-to-one mapping. And so there's probably holes in there, right? Like the reason that a post backup hook exists probably can't, like whatever reason, I'm not using those right now, but I imagine you're going to need a post restore hook in order to provide the inverse of that.
Sure, makes sense, thanks.
Yeah, and the overall goal is Velero just has no way of, there's no restore action right now. Like, we have backup hooks, there are no restore hooks. So like we need something to unpack that data that was backed up. So we're trying to get this in, but we want to make sure we get the restore hooks implemented in such a way that there's not really a possibility for data corruption.
And everyone, thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just in a more general question regarding restore, are there any plans in order to enable those kind of application complex restores to somehow allow Velero to use the Kubernetes orchestration of things, like to know when a pod is started or ready, and then maybe restore another pod, etc., or resource in general?
Yeah, to like use the graph of the resources and know more about the application.
Yeah, especially during restore, because during backup, it's also sometimes important to back up 2 or more pods at the same time. But during restore, it's even more crucial, I think.
That would be that would be great. I think that's a longer term thing. We want to do it. I think we want to get to that point. We've got surveys out there, and we've got ideas on making higher level constructs to back up based on like the application, whether that's there's been talk of like doing it based on Helm charts or the SIG apps application construct, or some way of using something that tells us, hey, this is what my app is made out of. It's made out of these pods, and it's not just pods, it's this pod has to go first. But I think right now we're in the building blocks phase. So I agree that would be really nice, and we want to get there, but I think we're also not quite there yet.
Yeah, actually, in the building block phase, maybe you want to take advantage, like have hooks based on the Kubernetes pod events, not just on Velero PV restore events or resource restore events. In general, I think that our use case, I'm from the ex-Pivotal team, I'm the PM of this team. I think that our use case and Mark's use case seems very similar, if not identical. I think that there are quite few databases that can't just reattach the data back to the database, because that's not how they do backup. They use their own snapshotting tool or their own backup tool, and then they need to, once the database server is up, and they need to create some permissions, etc., and then run some utility within the database server to restore the data. And that means that the data would probably be in another PV in its format that the database cannot consume directly, but by running a command. So I think it's not limited to just one type of database. That would probably be across the board right now.
Yep, like Zookeeper. I'm blanking on other database names, but yes, it's not just Postgres, but Zookeeper,
Elasticsearch, probably.
Elasticsearch, yeah, any of those. You're right, absolutely right, that they wouldn't just be, oh, snapshot the volume and put it back. It would be, you use a tool, send it to some other specific backup PV, and then on restore, you take it from that backup PV, put it in the runtime PV, and resume. Sorry, I think I interrupted you, Stephanie.
Oh, no worries, Nolan. I was just saying, thanks everyone for this really great discussion and for some of the use cases that were brought up here. We have comments running on the PR on Git and are working on scheduling a session that we will record and we'll post on the community channel to dive deep on this particular PR. And so we're hoping we'll get that information out to you all, and we're hoping that y'all will join us for that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all for the comments here. We have another meaty discussion topic coming up here. So Nolan and Carlisia, you want to talk about the public-private APIs?
Sure. So this is something that, quite honestly, we actually have moved code around quite a lot, and in our APIs, and we haven't been great about following our contract. So we're going to try to get better. I guess I can share my screen. Let's see. Share that. So this issue is pinned on the GitHub repo. We are going to try to move APIs, Go APIs that are not in this set into an internal package so that we can have a more delineated Go API. Now, this is not going to be immediate. This is going to be kind of as we find things. If you rely on anything not in this list, please let us know through this issue 2654, and we will try to accommodate you. We want, yeah, go ahead.
The generated package, that is, I guess with version 2.0, it's going to go away, but we don't have to worry about it until then, right? Like, because
that will eventually, yeah, client and generated will eventually change. But for now, this is where like the Velero client would go if you want to call CRDs, the client for CRDs. I know some of the plugins are using these.
Okay.
And as well as generated. But these are our purposefully public APIs. So, yeah, we're letting folks know these changes are coming, and we want to be loud about this. We don't want to just start moving things around and have people be surprised. This is at the top of the issue list. So yeah, if you're using something outside of this set, please leave a comment here. And I'm sure this will be a running topic for the community meeting. We don't want this to fall through the cracks. Anything to add there, Carlisia? Oh,
no, that's it.
Cool. Thanks, Nolan, for bringing it out. I think we mostly using the ones provided in the list here. However, I'll go through and drop a message like, even if, I mean, we are fine with this, or let's say like we are good with this list. I'll just go through the code and then, yeah. Thanks for bringing it out.
Yeah, and I did a search through GitHub. I think this covers most code. I don't think I could be completely exhaustive, and I don't know that all, like, just because I searched on GitHub doesn't mean I got all code. Some people could have code that's not on GitHub. So we're putting that call out there. Yeah, let us know. Like Carlisia said, we're going to be moving towards a queue builder and controller runtime structure in 2.0. And so the client and generated code will be different, and you can use the queue builder client to register the Velero scheme. So the client and generated packages will be gone by then, but for now, these are the intentionally public API. The rest is kind of a byproduct of how we structured things, and we haven't been great about deprecations and not moving things around. So if you've been relying on that, we've just been kind of moving when we needed to move stuff around. We did, but it's come up that, hey, maybe we should deprecate some of this stuff when we do that. So we've decided, how about we instead try to move that into an internal directory structure so that we're not exposing stuff we didn't intend to. And I think that's pretty much it there.
Yeah.
unless anybody else had any questions.
I have a question. So it's in conjunction with the client and the generated package that's going to differ in 2.0 with controller runtime client. So is there any place where folks can find out how the controller runtime generated client will be different from the actual client that's generated by client Go, or maybe I might be missing the exact specific, but the current client package. And if consumers are actually using the client package, would they have some sort of upgrade path from that client package dependency to the controller runtime client package, stuff like that? How would the upgrade look like from there?
So we're probably going to need to work on upgrade docs for that. I know the plan is to have them side by side for a little while as we start moving the controllers over. My understanding, and Carlisia, you'll have to help me here. My understanding is with the Cube Builder client, you get a scheme for an API group and you register that with the Cube Builder client. So you would import the Velero API group scheme, give that to a Cube Builder client, and the Cube Builder client could then look up any CRD registered in that API group.
Yeah, that is correct. So now, based on the API types, code gets generated to create those clients, and we use that clients, and other people use that clients that is generated. And so until we complete the migration, we're going to use, like Nolan said, the clients are going to stay there just the same, but we're also going to be using the Cube Builder client, the controller runtime clients as we migrate things. And the way, and as far as documentation, I mean, hopefully the Cube Builder controller runtime documentation will be sufficient for people to know how to do it, although we should add something, whatever is specific to Velero. But the same way that we instantialize the controller runtime will be the way other people will instantialize it, which is what Nolan said. The prerequisite there is mainly to add the schema, to add things to the schema, and it creates as per that those clients need to be created. It's very RESTful oriented. So for us, it would be nice not to have not having to have all of that generated code in tree.
Yeah, and that controller runtime client is basically it's like a dynamic client, but it can also get typed. It can get typed objects back. So it can get either unstructured data from the server or typed Go structs, which is a huge benefit to Velero code since it deals with both. But in terms of using it, Carlisia has dealt with this a lot more than I have, but my understanding is using controller runtime, you won't have to generate these specifically typed clients like we do for the Velero client anymore. You'll generate a scheme which knows about all of the registered CRDs and their Go types, and then you put that scheme into the client that's a controller runtime client.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I was just curious, but because I know that for the current clients, we can have informers on the generated Velero API. Consumers can use those informers to react on Velero changes. I was not sure how those informers will change when we move to controller runtime. I probably need to do some digging on
I can
how
give
that
you
is.
a very quick rundown on that. So with the controller runtime, if you use if you get the client through the manager, because you can also get a client, straight up client without using the manager.
Okay.
Hope it makes sense. But if you're using the client that gets generated through the manager, if you instantiate a manager and then you use the client from there, whenever it does a get or a list, it's fetching from the cache. And whenever you do a create update, then it gets inserted directly in the server. So we don't have to have that differentiated client informer and the other one. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. But so I'm sorry. When I said informers, I meant folks can use those informers to write like control loops on changes to Velero CRs and stuff like that. I'm not sure if controller runtime manager exposes informers to the build. I mean, I might be taking this discussion in wrong direction. I would have to look up and get back for more details on this.
Yeah, so I would suggest you, if you're going to look into it, start with the manager, because the manager provides the syncing, the watching, and it does that. We don't have to manage that. We can tweak it if we need to, but it's straight up, you create a controller, you pass a manager, and that is going to keep watching. And if you want to get an informant specific, there is also a way to do that. If you want to check if something has synced.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments on this topic?
Yes, I have one question. So as of now, under this package backup and package restore, we have some files so which are having some generic API like creating some delete request or using some resource for restore or backup. So are we planning to create new package so that through new package we can expose those API so other can use it, or we are going with this existing package only?
I would say if you're using it, please let us know on that issue. Well, I guess, and I'll ask, are you using it?
Yes.
Okay, then please let us know on that issue. It's again, that's issue 2654.
2654. Yeah.
Yeah, let us know. There was also like there's an issue somewhere. I'll have to find it, but there was an issue to at some point make package backup and package restore more like a library. And I think the big things we want to put in internal are like the controllers, but some elements of package backup and package restore may get pulled into internal. But we can definitely discuss what parts of package backup and package restore are public. But yeah, let us know. If you're using it and you really rely on it, then I would say we can discuss what will go in and out. And we won't necessarily break you entirely.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need to know.
Yes.
We don't want to break anybody's code, but we find ourselves right now where we have to be, I mean, if we are going to be careful about not breaking anybody's code, we have to maintain backwards compatibility with everything. Well, right? And that just is really restraining for us. There are packages that we know for sure people are not using or should not be using, and we have to answer the question: do we have to worry about maintaining backwards compatibility. Whereas if we know people are not using, we put in internal, we don't have to worry about that. So we just want to make sure we focus on what we do have to worry about and make sure we don't break anything for anybody. But at the same time, we can move forward without having to worry about breaking things for people. We totally, in other words, if we know people are using it, we are going to accommodate you one way or another.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just reiterate. If you're using it, please tell us.
Sure.
Great. Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, we're going to move on to the two last things for today. All right, Vishnu, you had you had two things you wanted to talk about.
Yep. The first one is about the default with the restic. I got to understand, like, there is an option to the CLI to pass to back up all the volumes with restic, but would it have been made sense, like like Velero core finds out that these are specific volumes which the plugins are interested, and apart from them, the other ones, if backed by restic, would that help? I mean, the reason is the user really configured the plugins, volume snapshot location, and the plugins has been installed, right? So I'm guessing, like, would it be more useful to user so that the remaining volumes will be backed by the restic by default?
So I want to clarify, this does not or should not turn on restic by default when you install Velero. This is when you pass the CLI flag, it's the third bullet point. When you turn on the server, if you tell the Velero server to default the volumes to restic, it's, if you have Velero start up now without adding that, then Velero is going to behave as it does today.
I think there is a, Nolan, I think there's a check in the code that if you pass this flag, but you don't pass the use restic, it will warn or complain or fail.
Right. And the other thing is there's a backup.velero.io/backup volume excludes. So you can add an annotation to exclude volumes from restic. So we added logic to say, so we actually flipped it so that if you have this enabled, you can say these volumes are not covered by restic.
Yeah, no, that makes sense totally. I think even the current behavior it have, I think it really fits well. I'm just thinking, like, for user, will it be make more sense? Like, I understand how we got with backup volume excludes, because the reason is users are supposed to provide the volumes you have to back up with restic. So, we try to reduce the kind of load, or like the manual steps to perform. So it's really helpful in that way. I'm just thinking, like, one more step is, will it helps if the plugins are not interested, then those will be done by restic, but by default, again, if those flags are all passed. That's just one thought I have, like, which can help users, is what I'm just thinking.
I guess I'm still not understanding.
Okay.
This option to me would be your platform doesn't support snapshotting at all. That's what I'm envisioning using this for.
Okay.
Would
it be possible to have a deployment, have multiple volumes and fewer from one set, like usually one kind of the storage, and the other can be from local PV where some logs are stored, that kind of things, like a mixed kind of approach if there are such kind of volumes. such kind of set of volumes in the deployment. So that's where I'm thinking like, okay, this plugin is interested by so and so, like the AWS plugin or the OpenAWS, whatever plugins we have installed, and then this is the one which no one is interested and can be done by restic. So that just one thought. So that will avoid users to provide excludes field. And again, if user provides only that flagsing hyphen default kind of thing.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So you're saying if there's no plugin registered for this volume type,
right,
then it would use Rustic.
Yeah, and it's not interested in.
Okay, I see. Yeah, we could certainly look at that. So I would say file an issue for that, and we can look into it and look at priority.
Yeah. Actually, but being said that, but this itself is really very first step, which is really helpful for user. I just thought that can be something which may help is what I'm just thinking about. This itself is a real good step for user to start with.
Yeah, no, and I don't want to dismiss that idea because I think it's a good one.
I raise one with the details.
Yeah, I think it's. I haven't seen many users with mixed deployments with mixed volume types, but I think that is a concern that we missed with this design. So if we have an issue, we can track that and see what we can do about it.
Sure, I will add one. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
The other one is again my design PR, but I think you in the starting of the updates, I think you mentioned like something which will take in this week. That's good. I just want to know about that. With that I'm good for my discussion points. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Vishnu. Last but not least, we have some contributor shoutouts. Nolan, you want to do these?
Yeah. So I've got two for Adam Rush. They're actually related. He added a Windows CLI installation option via the Chocolatey package manager and gave us some instructions for how to get that updated. So thank you very much, Adam. That's really cool. Jessica Grebin she developed and added documentation for the StoreJ and tardigrade object storage plugin. And that's pretty cool. I think, I'm sorry, I forget his name. Was it
Kevin?
Kevin. I wanted to say Jeff, but I knew that wasn't right. Kevin talked about that a few weeks ago on the community call. And also, Tony Batard here from the VMware Cat team updated our website to Jekyll 4.1.0. So it's much faster in building, which is very nice. And I also know he's working on migrating it from Jekyll to Hugo, which is a big effort, but I think it will be worthwhile. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. And with that, we're going to close out the community meeting for this week. Have a fantastic rest of the week, everyone, and see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.